The Boundless Authenticity podcast presents to you the Portal to Ascension series. The Portal to Ascension conference will be held April 21st to 23rd, 2023 at Marina Village Conference Center, San Diego, California. After 3 years of a collective dark night of the soul, the Portal to Ascension conference is returning live and in person and is fully activated for the mission ahead of us all. As energy continues to shift and hidden truths are being uncovered, we are piecing together the fragmented parts of our existence to create awareness of the truth of who we are and remember our connection to the cosmos. This event is all about deprogramming ourselves from the outdated matrix system and remembering who we truly are at the core. Discover ancient origins, uncover hidden truths, and recover your true identity with guest speakers Alan Steinfeld, JJ and Desiree Hertok, Linda Moulton Howe, Robert Schock, Caroline Corey, Robert Edward Grant, Barbara Lamb, Michael Cremo, Ra of Earth, Adam Apollo, Neil Gar, Joan of Angels, John Block, Deborah Gusty, Michelle Anderson, Eric Rankin, Geraldine Orozco, Shareya Dharma, Lori Wheeler, Torcum G, Lori Spania, Tangela, Jenna Layden, Sheila Seppi, Larissa Stowe, Fox Angeles, Stargate Experience, and Share the Light. Get tickets at ascensionconference.com. On this episode, I have a very real and insightful chat with Ra of Earth, a holistic coach who deals with everything from mindset to psyche to health and manifestation, so that you can reach your highest spiritual self. Visit raofearth.com or follow on Instagram at ra_of_earth. So how's it going?
Perfect. It's my standard answer to that question.
Awesome. Things are quite perfect here as well. So go ahead and tell everybody who you are and what you do.
My name is Ra, and I am going by Ra of Earth on my social media handles. And I have been a student and a teacher of the human experience for my entire adult life. I used to own gyms for about 10 years. I would say 5 or 6 years ago, I closed those. I have degrees in exercise science and psychology. So I've been studying psychology and consciousness and spirituality kind of in the background for the last 23 years. So after the gyms, I was able to really expose that part of myself and my interests. And I've been working currently on more psychology, mindset, really getting people to embrace the knowledge that we have about, our desires of how we would aspire to act, and really helping people through exercises to make that programming stick deeper into their subconscious so that it runs automatically, as opposed to some other programs that have been programmed, since we were 7 years old, running on autopilot. So I like to work with the inner mechanics of the human psyche, and that's what I've been doing currently. And then the social media thing.
Yeah, the social media thing.
The influencer thing.
Yeah, the programming thing. That's a whole lot like what I do. You probably got your own methods. So let's unpack some of those. What's your favorite way of helping people?
So for starters, I like people to be in a theta brain state, as opposed to just talking to somebody or a lot of times when we come across knowledge or wisdom, it's not in a theta wave state. We haven't just finished a yoga class, or we're not doing it right before we go to sleep. We're doing it kind of when we're just like up and bustling about in our mind. And like I said earlier, like getting that programming to stick, getting that knowledge to stick, having people down in a theta state allows for that to more easily happen. So that's where I would start. And that's kind of how I do. I've got online programming where we go through classes. So it's kind of, because I come from the gym world, right? And my gyms eventually became CrossFit gyms. And every single day we would do a different workout. And it was to basically make you stronger or cardiovascularly stronger or more gymnastic capable. And we would do different things every single day. So I kind of do the same thing with psychological drills, where we're doing different types of programming to work on different parts of ourselves every day. And we start those classes off kind of like a warm up with some sort of exercises, usually having to do with breath, getting us into that theta frequency state so that we're more receptive to the reprogramming. So I think that would be kind of like the answer to your question. And then the second part of the answer is journaling. I like writing exercises. I would prefer, like, that's kind of like my preferred method of operation, is having people answer certain questions and learn about themselves through writing.
It kind of makes things real for you to reflect on, right?
Yeah, it's about the questions that we ask ourselves. And a lot of times we just haven't ever asked certain questions about certain things or imagined certain things. And when we write it down, the good thing about writing it down is that we experience it when we're writing it down. Well, we experience it when it comes through our mind. Then we write it down. So we're experiencing it as we're visually seeing the words that we're writing down. And then we read it, which is another experience of the program that happens, all because we chose to write it down as opposed to just kind of ponder it. And that pondering just kind of like goes in and out, just floats away in the wind.
I agree with you on that one. There's so much of, not to diss anybody else, but there's so many processes that are kind of like talking at people. And then, the subconscious mind loops back over to the same program it was running before. And it's like, well, that just fell on deaf ears, didn't it? Like they can't, they can't access that level of wisdom and insight. They can only kind of get it secondhand through you, and they kind of go, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then like in my work, they self-sabotage right, like immediately the next day or 2 hours later, So you got to catch those programs with people.
I'm so happy that you said talking at people, because that's been the problem that I saw when I owned my gyms. Is it seemed like the more that I knew, the less let me rephrase this. The better the teacher I became, the less that I wanted to talk at them, to tell them what is, what I know. So the more that I knew, the less I wanted to reveal to my students, because it was better if they sort of figured out the process on their own. And so when I closed my gyms, I was trying to figure out the next sort of evolution of teaching, right? And I definitely knew that a top-down approach, where it was just like teacher, student, or parent, child, guru, disciple, like that method just isn't efficient. And I found a lot of progress in circles where people share their experience of an event. And in the sharing, the whole group learns, not from the teacher or the facilitator, but from the experience of the whole. And so that's another thing that we do at the end of our live classes, is that we get into smaller breakout groups and people share what they wrote down, which is like another, now we talk the words that we wrote down, and everybody can attain wisdom from other people's perspectives. And that's what we're all here for. And so, yeah, the talking at people method is getting played out. And I think that we're all, as humans, we're all ready for a new way of learning, not just from like coaches like you and I, but even just like actual school teachers, right? Like when we go to a school as a child, the way that it is right now, the teachers are the ones asking questions to the students and then determining if the students' answers are right or wrong. And that's backwards. The students be the ones asking the questions, right? There should be some sort of dialogue happening where the questions come from the students, not the other way around. And so, I mean, I think schooling is going to change, especially because we got a taste of that with all the schools shutting down in the entire world over the last couple of years. And maybe AI is going to have something to do with this shift, but I definitely see a shift in the way that kids are schooled.
Well, while we're on this topic, then I kind of got caught there between two questions and almost ate one of them. Anyways, you mentioned the idea of schooling. How much, in your view and based on your work, is it that people have not left high school?
So, okay, so I think there's a bunch of different ways I can receive that question, but I'll answer it from an angle that I constantly ponder on, and that is that the promise of school is that we're going to learn what we need to know in life, and so people graduate, whether it's college or high school, and then there's just like this arrested development. They go into the workforce, or they go into the party scene or the friend scene or the marriage life or whatever it is. And they were promised by our parents and by the system that school is when you do the learning. And now we're doing the adulting, right? And now we're doing like the whatever, just living out our life cycle. And there's not a habit of learning. And I think that there is a disconnect in the experience of life and the cycle of learning, practicing, teaching, right? Like this is something that we would be doing throughout our entire life. If there was no such thing as school, we would all be learning something, practicing it. And then once we got good enough, we would be teaching somebody else. And that would be just kind of how culture teaches, how just culture learns and evolves. And so I don't know exactly how you're asking that question. It could have been a different way, but for me, I noticed that people are disillusioned that they don't need to learn anymore when it's so simple to do, to pick up a book or to go to a seminar regularly, though, not like once because your ex-girlfriend made you do it, or your job made you go to some weekend seminar so that you can get a $2 an hour raise, but because they're interesting. Like, can we find things that we're interested in to learn from experts? And it's amazing. I mean, you can even use YouTube. It's free to learn. Knowledge is literally free now. And yeah, there's no reason to be stuck back in high school.
I agree with you.
Answer that. I was going to say the other way to answer that is like, because there's this arrested development, then the psychological state that we were in high school seems to linger through the entire adult life, because there's no like evolution. There's no foundation of evolution through an entire life. Like we kind of just get to high school and we get stuck there, as you said it.
Yeah, I felt like that was a relevant question to ask because I see so many people, whether it's in my business or my personal life, they're trying to put plasters over infected wounds and they don't realize where they got that method from. So they try to apply the same strategy in their daily life. They're 35 years old and they're trying to do the same thing they would have done if Susie didn't want to sit next to them at the lunch table at school when they were 9, and they are in this perceptual position of themselves in the world where like I didn't do that. That's the other person that's not responding well to me or things like that. And so I just want to address this with you because I know you're well versed in psychology and people want to know these things. People want to go away from this podcast thinking, gosh, am I doing that? How can Ra help me? What can I get out of this? Are there ways that I am just incorrectly viewing myself that are causing me to be 9 years old forever? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? You know, because we see it on TV too. And I'm a big progenitor of this idea that television is very destructive to your consciousness when you're not using it for learning purposes, like really strengthening your mind. Because it's just a direct bypass into your brain. You can't really accept or reject things, even if you're angry about what you're seeing. It becomes ideas that go right in, and you never know when they're gonna play out. So if you're watching, I don't know, what's that guy, Adam Sandler? If you're watching an Adam Sandler movie or a Channing Tatum, and these guys are like 15 years old forever, then the chances are you might relate to that somehow in your life on a level that you may or may not have any control of on a subconscious level, you know? And we see it's almost like an archetype that's become a real tangible thing, the Adam Sandler archetype in society with some guys. I've known some of those guys myself, you know? Like I ran into some guys I went to school with, and they're the exact same guys when we left school. I was like, holy crap, man, what happened?
TV happened, because back to theta state, what do you think you're in when you're laying back on a nice, comfortable couch, legs outstretched, arms are like sinking into the sofa, breath is nice and deep. You're literally going into your dream state, your theta state, and then the TV's just got, like you said, just instant access deep into our psyche of what it wants to program into you. And then you just really have to ask yourself the question, like, what is the TV's purpose? I mean, the purpose is the advertisers. And then you're looking at the commercials. I'm always amazed when I actually do get around a TV, I go somewhere and it's like, there's only so many commercials, right? You got like the chips and like the party foods, fast food, car commercials, beer is like a huge one, like beer and liquor, and pharmaceuticals, candy. Like this is the programming. It's all to get you to purchase that. And then you're like, okay, what kind of person do I need to be where these things are appealing to me? Because that's really the point of the television. If that's the advertisers want you to purchase the products, then the whole point of the television is to turn you into the type of person that thinks it's a good idea to eat from 7-Eleven, eat breakfast at 7-Eleven, eat McDonald's for lunch, have candy, in between, and drink beer and liquor every single night. Like, is that the type of person? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with somebody enjoying themselves and making choices, but we need to be aware of the choices that we're making and making sure that it's our choices and that this TV or any other influence in our life, including you and I, like, people should be conscious of what they're being influenced by and at least make a clear decision. Do I trust this? Is this adding to my aspirations? Does this enrich my vision of life? And then they can choose TV or not TV. But I just like people to have that awareness of the choice that they're making.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. So, I mean, we can take this conversation in so many directions because you're so well versed in so many different things. And it's like, I want to ask you 50,000 different things all at once right now. But I feel like my most important question is, how can someone who is at a beginner level of understanding tap into their subconscious and begin to notice that they're playing out patterns in their life?
So That's a very, very deep question because everyone has a different answer to that, right?
I know.
When you're working with somebody one-on-one, you can almost see it within 5 minutes of sort of what's the theme in their life and what they're attached to and what they're running. It's very easy when you're the outsider, and you don't even need to be that advanced, right? You could just be not even educated in this stuff and just be somebody's best friend, and you can see things about their programming that they can't see. You know that they're dating the same type of person over and over and over again for the last 15 years, and the same problems are happening, and you can see why if you know about their childhood. But I would go back into childhood. I mean, that's the sort of the cliche sort of psychologist thing, right? Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about your mom. Tell me about your dad. But I like an exercise where you imagine somebody that you loved when you were very young. So it could be a mom, it could be a dad, it could be an absent dad, it could be an absent mom, it could be a teacher, but at some point they hurt you. The love was broken, the trust was broken. And if you could go back to that moment or that reference point and have a conversation with them on paper, like I said, I like journaling. If you have a conversation with them on paper and you get to tell them all of the things that you desire to tell them, right? As the 8-year-old or the 9-year-old or the 5-year-old, you speak to this person from that standpoint, and you have them reply to you in all of the ways that you needed them to reply to you, but maybe didn't in actual life. But you go back and forth in this conversation, and you let them know why they hurt you, why they, what it caused you. And then you have them reply in exactly the words that you needed to hear. Through this process, you're discovering. Your question was, how do we discover the programmings that we're running? This is almost like discovering the reverse of the programming. You're discovering what is missing, what is missing to you, because we all are craving different things. So for somebody who, let's say, comes from an adopted family, they may be more sensitive, or they may crave acceptance because, let's say, their foster family or the family that took them in. And this might not be all adopted families. I'm just saying, I should say foster families. People have trauma, they go into the foster system, they come out, they might have some trauma around acceptance. This exercise for them might be about acceptance, but they might not know that they have this trauma around acceptance. And you get to figure out and have these conversations with, let's say you're this person with this foster parent that treated them cruelly or treated them like they were just a paycheck, because that's sometimes what happens. People adopt kids so they get money from the government, and then the kid doesn't really get the care that they need. So if there's this conversation that you go back and experience, you discover that you have this trauma and that you really needed to be accepted. You needed to feel loved. And then you comprehend this aspect of yourself. Somebody else might have another issue, right? But if you go back, we all should have some point in our life where somebody that we're looking up to or loved hurt us. And knowing how we got hurt and what it takes for us to be healed, knowing that conversation allows us to, number one, not let our current relationships to go, not let ourselves push our current relationships into this same exact frame of reference, because that's what we're comfortable with, right? That's how we were programmed to experience love. It allows us to discover maybe where we have a wound and know that we can communicate this with our current loved ones, that, things that they might not know bother you. Hey, when you leave in the morning, you don't kiss me good morning. it really feels like you're being ripped away from me, and that I'm not feeling loved. I'm feeling fear. It allows you to express your vulnerable emotional states, as opposed to maybe you don't know this and you let this happen and it builds up and you don't know why you're being angry with them, but it's because you've been feeling like they have been abandoning you over something that they're just getting up for work. In their mind, they're just off to work. And it's such an easy thing if you know your programming and you know what you need, and then you can communicate it with your current people. This is a good question. I'm kind of just rambling right now. I hope this is meaningful a little bit.
Keep on rambling, man.
So yeah, discovery. It's an amazing question that you had. Like, how do you discover the programs that you don't know that you're running? And so this is an example of an exercise that you can go and find a wound. You can go and find a trauma. And rather than expecting the world to heal it for you, or even expecting this other person, if they're still alive, like you might feel like your life can't go on because this person treated you a certain way. But really, the power is in you to fill in the space. And I'm not saying we need to ignore what happened. There's still, it's more of a compassion. It's recognizing that it happened and you learning from the situations for you to know what ultimately is going to fulfill you the most now. And you can then harmonize yourself with business partners, harmonize yourself with romantic relationships. Like, let's say the foster child example, where the person makes you feel tremendously accepted and tremendously loved. And you now know that that's a need that you have that is very strong, and it comes from this place. And there's no need to be ashamed of it, but that's now sort of like a green flag or a red flag that you can spot in potential partners, because you have this need. That's a very real need.
Well, thank you for that answer. I'm sure that probably helped a lot of people. This podcast is all about giving. At least for me, it's all about giving, because what I found is that a fair amount of people will come for coaching or whatever it is they need from me, and they can't afford to get the help, and they say, like, this thing is so expensive. And I know that a lot of that is a pattern for them too, where that's just their belief about these kinds of things. And if you look at how they spend their money, they could easily afford it if they did a little bit less of the sabotaging things that they did. But I also do meet people who are genuinely just broke. Just genuinely, you got to scrape them off the bottom of the barrel a little bit. And so this gives them an opportunity to get close to someone like you, who has a lifetime of insight to share. And so I just want to thank you for giving such deep answers that we can help people. What other topics will you be exploring at the Ascension Conference?
So that's actually, yeah. So I'm going to be speaking. I want to say it's the first conference I've ever spoken at. I know I've gotten invited to some other ones, but I didn't make it. So if I make it to the Ascension Conference, it's April 21st to the 23rd in San Diego, then I believe it's the first conference. I mean, I've spoken at conferences before, never mind. But Yeah, I have. I just remembered a whole bunch. It's been a while though, it's been a few years since anyone's been at conferences. So it's going to be about this. It's how do we take, I feel that a lot of people, like you said, they're looking for help. And I know this because I send out I have an automated service that sends out messages to people on Instagram when they follow me. And it's sent out like 25 to 30,000 messages so far. And not everybody replies, but a lot of people reply. And a lot of people have questions and a lot of people have visions of themselves. And a lot of them don't know how to create that version of themselves. And a lot of people, when they're thinking about the vision of their life, it's determined by external things, right? But that's not the change that's real. Even if your external environment shifts around you, nothing changes internally unless you change internally. The external circumstance doesn't change it. And yeah, we hear these super wealthy people say like money doesn't buy happiness, but neither does being broke. And that's true. Like money does make things, and external environments can make you more comfortable. But we all know celebrities that have everything and powerful people that have everything, and they still allegedly commit suicide. I don't want to say that they all do that, but they're depressed. They're partying for a reason. You know, they're escaping. They're using all to escape this glamorous life that millions of other people think that if they just had, they would be happy. And there's proof that having that doesn't make you happy. There's this huge gap that I feel, knowing what I know from psychology and just knowing the casual conversations that I've had with thousands of people online, that there's a gap between the ideal state of being that somebody desires to be and where they are right now. And a lot of people have awareness of this gap. They do. They have awareness that they have an anger problem. They have awareness that they have self-shame, or that the voices in their head are overwhelming to them. They have awareness that they can't handle being around other people. So people are waking up to their own, let's just say, limits and imperfections. And I'm not saying we should strive to be perfect, but it's good that we know where we can grow. And the issue is that they don't know how to go from point A to point B. Like they don't have much knowledge or practice to close that gap. And then the reason for that is the external circumstances, right? That's the easy thing, is we say, oh, because everything outside is not right, that's why there's this gap. But that's not really it, right? It's the stuff going on inside that's the reason. And I'm going to be talking about how that works, and I'll have, an exercise session, kind of like what I just gave to you. I don't actually know exactly what I'm going to have. I usually make those decisions right before I present them. Because if I program too far in advance, I always change my mind anyways. But I will have an exercise that just helps people understand, the difference and what we can do to be who we desire to be. Because every day we wake up, and I'm just saying, we collectively, we wake up and we imagine ourselves as this image, and then we walk out into the street and we get into our car and somebody cuts us off, and that just goes all out the window. It's like we imagine ourselves as this ascended, on the path, on the journey, but it seems difficult to actually be it and act it. And here's the crazy thing, is that even if we're able to master how we're externally projecting ourselves, right? We're respectful to people. We're compassionate with people. We're understanding. We can forgive other people. The most important person to be compassionate with and to be respectful to is yourself. And so the niceties that we can behave externally to other people, that's an achievement. That's great. It's really great that we can see somebody being stupid and in our head not think that they're stupid, right? It's like, that's an achievement, to accept what is in another person. To be able to accept ourselves seems to be a more difficult task for a lot of us. And that's where I like to start with people, because if we can get somebody respecting themselves, not getting angry with themselves, loving themselves, seeing themselves as a process and a progression, then how they view other people almost just happens automatically. Like we just become, if you can be nice to yourself, you just automatically are nice to other people if you do it correctly, right? Obviously there's the narcissist and the person that's completely consumed with competing with other people. And that's where being a professional comes in handy, and knowing the difference between loving yourself because you think you're better than everyone else, or loving yourself because you genuinely see yourself as having a human experience like everybody else, and you're not looking at yourself like you're some isolated idiot. Which is, I use these languages because this is a language that we use, like I'm such an idiot. Like we don't realize that everybody else makes the same mistakes, and we refuse to see that. We're just so consumed with me being the only idiot to ever exist in all of history.
Yeah, you got that right. People just don't know how to do the things that they don't know how to do. So, having said that, where can we find you?
At raw, so RA_of_earth on Instagram. And I've got a whole bunch of other channels as well, but most of it can all be found at rawoferarth.com. That's where most everything gets channeled in through. There's a lot of stuff that I do, but I, just brought up the relevant stuff here. There's a whole lot of stuff that I do. Like nutrition, all the things that I do are focused on the advancement of self, right? Like even the gyms, I was sort of like confused. I was consumed with human performance and our abilities to expand ourselves from a performance standpoint, and an aesthetic standpoint, and a health standpoint. And I think that all of those play into it as well. The type of food that we're eating and how our body's processing that food, and even the balance of the bacteria in our body. There's a word called holobiont that means that a human being isn't just a human being. A holobiont is basically an organism that is actually a collection of organisms. So it's not just one organism. It's like a collection of organisms that we then call an organism. And that's what a human being is. A human being has more bacteria cells. A human being has more bacteria in it, which are non-human, than it does human cells. So what that means is that there's a whole lot of us that we need to function, we need to process, we need to think, we need for our emotions. There's a whole lot of us that aren't human. And so we should strive to take care of that bacteria. And we hear about things like gut health, but sometimes we don't realize that a lot of our happy hormones, our dopamine, is made in our digestive system. It's made in our gut. And there's lots of neurons in our digestive system also. I want to say 100 million. I think there's 100 million neurons in our digestive system. And these neurons are going from our gut to our brain. They're signaling our brain how to behave, how to think, what we're craving. Like when you start craving the food that you're eating, it's not like you're thinking in your head brain that that's what you want to eat. It's your gut is telling you, I want this. And the things that are in there telling you that are the bacteria. So we want to make sure that that's all taken care of so that we can process food and we can think and emote in an aligned way. I'm going to keep on talking, Jehan. Did you say your name, Jehan?
Hey, that works. I usually just go Jehan.
Jehan. All right. So Jehan, like for me, what I'm concerned with, I know you mentioned self-sabotage, which is an amazing topic, because the reason why we do things like that it's almost like an addiction in a way. We are addicted to our current state. So when we start moving in a different direction, we just like pull ourselves back to where we're more comfortable. For me, alignment is sort of that's kind of my stable thread through everything that I feel is important. And we've got our thoughts. So even when we just talk about neurons, I know these numbers, but I don't want to misquote them. But there's a tremendous amount of neurons in our head brain. There's 40,000 neurons in our heart. I mentioned there's 100 million in the gut. I might be wrong there. But there's up to 100 trillion in our fascia all throughout our body. And so we've got like this whole neural network called our body. And that's electrical, or some people say biophotonic. So it's actually light, more like light than it is electricity. And then we've got the resonance of the magnetism of our heart. And so we've got like this electrical magnetic field generated around us, and we're in an electromagnetic environment. And fields of energy, when they interact with each other, what a field will do is it'll harmonize to another field. So if one field meets another field, it'll start to harmonize with each other. And the stronger field, it will have influence over the weaker field of energy. And the way that we strengthen our system, our electromagnetic system, is alignment. As if our thoughts are in alignment with our emotions and our feelings, that are in alignment with what our actions are, what our body's doing, in alignment with what we're consuming, both in our digestive system, in conversations, in the television, if all of those things are in alignment, then we will be extremely powerful within reality. We will be extremely powerful when we're interacting with other humans that are a field of energy themselves. And so my thing is, how do we get the human system to be in alignment so that you're living the life that you're thinking about and feeling about, and you're being in your essence, discovering what your true passions are and living them to the fullest degree, moment by moment, in the greatest expression of yourself. That's sort of my thing. I like to do that. I like to find alignment within people, because when everybody's in alignment, everyone's living out their passions, everyone's creating what they love, we get to live in the dream world that we're all creating. And so I just love supporting people to find that dream life, because if we all were living out our dreams, this world would be a much different place.
I gotta agree with you there. 100%. Well, thanks for being on the Boundless Authenticity podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're listening to the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where we discuss everything related to the evolution of human consciousness.
At the very least, people need to understand that the United States builds bunkers, which are basically cities underground, every 3 months.
Basically, when you dream, you tap into your subconscious. It is your nocturnal intuition, your creativity and imagination unchained from conscious reason, ego and logic.
They're biologically alive, but they have no soul. They have AI consciousness. They can alter your consciousness in the brain to get in the brain.
We live in a multidimensional reality, whether it comes through esoteric information in the spiritual realms, or the UFO people, experiencers, or mainstream through quantum physics and through mainstream science now realizing that parallel dimensions probably exist.
We're all spiritual beings. We're all having these human experiences. We've heard that phrase over and over and over. But what does that really mean?
You know, all the big questions of life, we have these answers inside of our souls.
We're ultimately studying the nature of what it is to be human, good and evil, our psychology, how we think, and our health. That's why I love Bruce Lee's great quote, all knowledge is ultimately self-knowledge.
The Boundless Authenticity podcast.